Namaste and welcome to the Hindu Women's Festival 2021, hosted by Beyond the Bindi. So we'll be talking about depiction of women in art across different cultures, primarily looking at the Western art as well as Indian art. My name is Falguni and today I'll be in conversation with Pruthvi Trivedi. Pruthvi is a digital marketing manager and artist, studied architecture at university and has contributed towards Beyond the Bindi anthology, which will be published later this year. After being involved with Beyond the Bindi, she has launched Art by Pruthvi. So this is really exciting. So welcome, Pruthvi.
Namaste.
Namaste. And it's brilliant that off the back of your research, you've launched your own Instagram page. Am I correct?
Yeah, correct. And, for over a decade, I've been doing commissions, but this is really Beyond the Bindi, and working with Beyond the Bindi has really just sort of pushed my confidence out there to be a bit more public about it, and also be confident about the research that I'm doing in art history, and, some of the conversation that we're going to have later on as well. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Now, I'm really looking forward to this. And I read some of your research that you've been doing. And I found the beginning part so interesting. I'd love for you to share that with the audience, because you talk about the history of art, yet there is elements that are not even touched. So do you care to elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. So throughout my experience, learning in education and career, there have been certain incidences where it's really had an impact on how I see art and how I see society's reflection of the arts. And one example that I can give is in my first lecture at university, when I was a student studying architecture, the lecture was called World History Architecture. And it really started at Greek architecture being the mother of architecture, and it went westward. But nowhere did it turn around and go eastward and see the amazing contributions of architecture that a whole part of the world has to offer within that timeline. For me, I actually thought that should be called European world architecture. And I think, to be honest, if I wasn't of Indian descent and I wasn't a British Hindu, I wouldn't have even questioned it. I would have taken that on board and seen that lecture as the all knowledge that many of the other students would have taken on. So it was instances like that made me really start to question the way that institutions are set up and what they're representing and what they're actually giving to future generations, essentially.
Yeah, and it is really disappointing, because it's the whole Eastern world is full of art, the whole culture, whether it's dance, whether it's drawings, whether it's the actual architecture, is all art is such a significant element of that Eastern culture. So it's I was really surprised when I read that. So thank you for sharing that. Now it's so where does this interest start? The connection between female representation in art, in Indian art especially, and compared to what you've been taught?
Yeah, so the connection between femininity and art really actually stems from two passions that I've had since a very young age. Art being a huge encouragement from my parents and school, small things like during Diwali doing rangolis or entering rangoli competitions, to in the house having this mandir that you have at home, this temple structure, and understanding what that actually means on a day-to-day side, and how those small incidences actually helped me understand who I am and where I come from. And the second part, femininity, I've been brought up working with so many amazing women and girls doing society work and so much more, as you have as well, Falguni. And I think that's had a huge influence, and understanding who I am as a British Hindu woman and trying to sort of dissect what that means and where I need to go in my own journey. The two, actually, the marriage of the two, femininity and art, was really natural for me. And so much that not only was it me, but also my parents, that encouragement was there from a very young age. And, you know, I knew that I was never going to have one of those careers where, you know, it's traditional. I wouldn't say traditional, but let's not get into that. But, you know, a creative career was something that my parents definitely saw in me, and that's what they encouraged. But again,
and that's brilliant, because not many women, or even, you know, not that that's not really encouraged as much in our community. So, and it can be, obviously, but primarily it is going to be like accountancy, law, etc., medicine, you know, the sciences that are promoted, not so much things like art. So, you know, kudos to your parents for firstly encouraging that. It's brilliant. And I myself have seen some of your amazing artwork, which you've displayed in the background, and also your amazing dances as well. So totally a very talented woman I see in front of me. Now, one of the conversations when we were having, you were talking about how there was less guidance for you during university when you were trying to merge or kind of tap into this Indian art. Can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, you know, even at the home, in a mandir that you have at home, or doing rangolis with your family and things like that, you know, there's a huge part of us, you know, that has art in it within dharma and the culture that we kind of live in, that we're brought up in. And bringing that into whether you're studying or your career actually is quite natural. So when I was doing my A-levels in art, actually, that's actually the first incident when I saw that institutions just don't understand this Eastern side at all. They have so much breadth of knowledge of like the Renaissance, even African art. But when I wanted to bring an aspect of who I am into my artwork, when I was trying to define and develop my own style, that actually came from me doing Kathak, a dance form. And there's a scripture called Chitra Sutra, which is really how life is around art and how that's all made up in the art world. And it actually says how music, dance, and art are all interconnected. And for you to understand how the body moves and how the figuring works in dance, you understand that, and that is brought into the art. So for me, that was actually a very personal connection as well, because I was really into my dance, my Kathak, and then bringing that into art, it really helped me understand how the body works and how then to draw movement in body and figures. Yet my teachers, unfortunately, you know, they were so talented, they didn't have much guidance to give when it came to Indian art. They absolutely welcomed the idea. They saw it as different, and they saw it as actually helping me develop. But there was no guidance, and that is something quite upsetting, that, you know, I'm still learning and looking up to teachers to learn, yet it wasn't really there.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't know if you've ever actually felt that, you know, I'm sure it's not just in art, but this just not understanding how deep this culture can be. It just, yeah.
Yeah, I myself was a media student, so I definitely understand that, because it's this stereotypical view of Asians being represented, yet there's so much more depth to us, which is just not acknowledged. So I, you know, completely get what you're saying, but in another medium. So now, one of the things which we discussed was the painting, the depiction of Virgin Mary. Now, and how you then compare it to like a goddess-like figure in Hindu dharma. So do you want to, because this painting is so interesting when you actually start kind of, looking at it in more depth. And as artists, I'm sure you could give a bit more insight to us and explain that painting and the significance this painting holds.
Yeah, sure. So I've got it here, so I'll just share it. There we go. So you should be able to see it now. And it's very, very visual. And essentially, when the painting was made, it was made in a pyramid form. So you have God in Christianity at the top, Virgin Mary in the middle, and the apostles, i.e. representing society and man on earth at the bottom. And there was this real hierarchy going on there. And as when you look at it and where it's placed in the world right now, so the reason why I actually chose this this painting to actually kind of dissect and include in my research is it was by an artist called Titian, who's one of the most famous artists representing Renaissance. And most people, especially people in Britain, understand that the Renaissance was a huge revolution. It not only reflected revolution in art, but it also influenced society. You go to any European town and the Renaissance is present there. That's how big and revolutionary it was. So Titian, having created this piece, so significant, and where it stands right now, we talked about the pyramid form, but in live scale of the painting, the figures are much, much bigger than any human form. That's just how impactful that painting is. So it definitely represented what society should be thinking at that time, and it's definitely impactful today. But if you think about the pyramid, where is Virgin Mary? She's sandwiched in between men. And the elements like this actually formed a lot of challenges when the feminist art movement in the West actually started to form, challenging the idea of, why is she sandwiched in men, between men? And, we kind of want to reject the idea. So already the placement of a woman is in question, or, that thought of where she is in that painting is something to consider. But another thing is comparing that with what we understand femininity about in Indian art or Hindu art, is there's small subtle nuances in that painting. So for example, in Christianity, the color blue is seen to be the color of purity. So she's wrapped in this robe completely in blue, and the only other blue that you see are the angels or God up there. And that connection, saying Virgin Mary has reached purity, which is why she's now going up to heaven, just by that color reference, is really clever, but it actually says something about what society should think about and what purity is. And it makes you think that Virgin Mary, well, what's pure about her? Well, she's the Virgin Mary. She, she's the mother of Jesus. So, she's completely pure. But then you question, then what is motherhood? And a mother today, is she pure then? What is this purity that we're talking about? Would a mother in our society today be completely wrapped in blue? And would she then be able to reach this idea of heaven if she's not pure? But then when you think about what you and I know as everyday knowledge to us, but somebody might define that as Hinduism or Hindu dharma, our idea of a mother is that no matter what, no matter where she is or what she's a mother. That in itself is purity. And when you look at how that connection is with, say, goddesses, it's a very different narrative. So yeah, there's small other examples. Another example I can give with that painting is God himself is crowning her He's physically got a crown in his hand, and he's placing it on Virgin Mary. What does that show? That Virgin Mary herself is being glorified by God. It's given to her. But, where do we stand? Do we get a choice of what we do in terms of what makes us crowned with the status?
Yeah, so like I'm just referring back to that painting, because what I saw here, like you quite rightly pointed out, that it's kind of trying to portray that Mary needs men to uplift her to get to heaven, and obviously then there's God reaching out to her to bring her to that status. So she's kind of put in on such a pedestal in one aspect, for a woman to kind of aspire to be, I'm assuming, in some way or another. And then you've also got this element where you need that man to uplift you. Yeah. But quite contrary to what we then see in an Indian goddess. So, we call Durga Ma the mother of all gods for us. And there you see this fearless woman. Like if you see this Virgin Mary picture, she comes across quite vulnerable. And yet when you see a picture of the goddess, her posture is so confident. She's sitting on a lion or a tiger, and quite fearless. So it's actually quite the opposite of what you see here. And I think that's really fascinating when you see that difference of what a woman represents, the qualities, the confidence, the fearlessness, and various other factors that we can go on about. But yeah, I picked up on that when I looked at that painting compared to a painting of a goddess.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And, I think maybe it's a personal journey, but for me, when I look at the iconography and exactly what you're saying, a goddess sitting on a lion, I don't think that actually has got anything to do with whether it being inspiring, whether you're a woman or a man. It can be inspiring for both men and women in today's world. That confidence, that shakti that you have, that that fearlessness, or that you're able to control a situation yourself. Whereas when you look at Renaissance art, or where that stems from, Byzantine art, which is definitely alternately defined as Christian art, when it comes to women, it's representing women and women only. Whereas what I find so inspirational about is I can talk to my brothers or my nephews or my father and so on about what goddesses and goddess Durga represents. In the same way, I can talk about what she represents and how inspiring she is to my sisters, my mother, and so on. It's that kind of that translation of qualities that is inspiring no matter who you are. So yeah.
Yeah, and again, coming to that other point about women in Western art being represented either this angelic, Mary Virgin-like figure, or quite the opposite, someone quite seductive. So again, it's that one end of the scale to another, yet there's nothing in there that shows the confidence of a woman or all these greater qualities of a woman. It's just one extreme to another.
And I think historically that was definitely the case, and you can see that historically paintings were done by men, and what was seen in their eyes was how to objectify in a way, but essentially their understanding of what a woman's role is in that society, it's either completely pure or completely seductive. Now there's with feminist movements and so on, it's starting to challenge that, but again, that's kind of where my research has kind of questioned of, is it just about challenging that, or is it about something way more? So for example, like what we were saying, qualities that can inspire not just that gender conversation, it's so much more than that femininity can give. So why are we only questioning and challenging you know, what historical Christian art or Renaissance art was giving of what women are, and, you know, how they should be in society, essentially. So yeah, there was definitely those two strong statuses of women. So
yeah. And when we think about, you mentioned the Chitra Shastra, yeah, and from what I understand of that, it was it talks about art inspired by nature. Is that correct?
Yeah, completely. And it literally, like, this scripture is so unknown to the masses. I only actually came across that in recent years. But the references that it gives is what we know as common knowledge. For example, as Hindus, we are nature worshippers. It references that very clearly in art as well, that we take inspiration from nature, whether it's flowers or landscape or generally what's happening around us, and in a way that reflects in the art, but it also enables art to influence society, which is so clever, which is amazing. One of the things that I'm finding fascinating is how art actually was a huge movement in itself for Indian independence, and this idea of Bharat Mata, she was, you know, an existing idea way before Indian independence, but how this figure of Bharat Mata can connect the whole nation, I think, is so inspiring. But I'm sure more of that another time.
Yeah, because it was Sister Nivedita that kind of brought that awareness again, wasn't it? Because it's stuff that's existing, but it's when things get suppressed a bit, and obviously she helped bring that to light again. So definitely, that was interesting to read. Now, whilst we're talking about art and nature, and I think especially over this last year, I think art has been significant for a lot of people. It's some sort of art, because really we've not had much to do. So, you know, we've ended up becoming a bit more creative in what we're doing. And it's also given us a bit of opportunity to take time out and really quite focus on our little skills, or just move away from the screen. Like, so my nieces, they recognize that, okay, Massey is spending far too much time on your laptop, on all these Zoom meetings. You need to stop. So they actually bought me this painting, this art by number. And it was brilliant. Paint by number, paint by number.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant. Like, I don't think I picked up a brush like that, that intricate. I could do probably a big blob or something, but not. It took so much patience, and honestly, my wrists were hurting at the end of it. But it was beautiful to kind of connect with the colours and just really focus on that painting. And yeah, like, and so many people have been you know, enjoying this right now, because there's a huge demand by paint by numbers, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I reference Chitra Sutra again. You know, one of the things that it mentioned, the whole thing about Ajanta caves, if anybody has a chance or has already gone to visit the Ajanta caves in India, that was one of the most early sightings of art in very, you know, many years ago. And it was described as meditation to either look at the art or create the art itself. And that's kind of what we're experiencing again in lockdown completely. You know, for me, I launched this art page because for me, that was definitely that me time, that, you know, feeling of kind of just letting go, building all my emotions and expression into that. For many people, it was something a bit more lighthearted. The paint by numbers has been a huge thing. And, you know, it's just guidance. Again, we were talking about guidance at the beginning. It's guidance to really help you put something together and have something amazing and beautiful at the end of it. You know, and for many other people, there's different things: music, dance. Loads of people have been taking up cooking during lockdown. That's all art, you know, it's all creativity. Yeah, and I remember you saying something about your mum doing some artwork as well, which is amazing to see, that, you know, somebody who isn't used to that, but just getting that opportunity to experience what it is like, to not be on the screen, to do something creative. So yeah.
Yeah, so like when during this lockdown period, there's a women's group in Ashton called Deepak Trishti, and they really encouraged this. They ended up sending rangoli patterns out with lots of, you know, colorings and stuff like that. So, and there's like hundreds of women involved in this organization. So it's really nice how they're encouraging that, get creative. Yes, we can't go out. Yes, we can't physically meet up. And I'm sure they used to do those activities face to face anyway, but they've not, because they can see the value in this, A, for like mental health reasons, you know, that's such a big thing at the moment. And just kind of connecting different art that, you know, examples that they're sending, or they're now doing Zoom calls and let's do rangoli with lentils together.
Yeah.
So it is incredible that how even these organizations have really tapped into being creative, and especially for women who are brilliant in the kitchen. Like my mum is excellent in the kitchen, but you ask her to pick up a paintbrush, she cannot understand colors. Like I remember the first lockdown, she just kept coming, I'll be working away, she's like, I use this color with this, and I'm like, oh my god, I really don't care. But for her, it was
amazing that when you think about art separately, you kind of get a block in your mind. Whereas if you take small inspirations from your everyday life, so for example, one thing that I love about the paints that I use is that it connects to, say, floral, or what I see in the kitchen sometimes, the turmeric. You describing colors not as orange or saffron, you describe colors as turmeric or beetroot color and things like that, because, you know, you're just taking all those other experiences that you have in life into that medium, into that art form. And as soon as you start to connect those dots, it just becomes one. And I think going back to how that connects to Indian art, you know, for me, as that personal journey as a British Hindu, that exactly has been all those different experiencing, actually bringing that into a medium, creating something very unique compared to my peers. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think as we have like this unique position in a way as well, I feel, as British Hindus, I think this innate quality for art is just there, that creativity, whether we, you know, whether it's through our culture, whether it's through our parents' kind of, you know, contributions or encouragement. All our festivals, look at it, they're also related to, like we have rangolis, you know, we have something like that we're constantly connecting, whether it's or it could be anything. And that those things really do help build this creativeness in us through, as we're young, we think not much of it, but as we get older, that's what helped shape us a bit. I think, and for people like yourself who've then kind of gone on to continue studying that, now what kind of message would you have, like, for the newer generation, the generation out there who, because let's face it, I think still that within our community, the Hindu community, there's still a lot more emphasis on other kind of, you know, especially when it comes to education, when it comes to work, a lot of it is get a secure job, get something that's going to pay you well at the end of it. Yet that encouragement, yes, as when you're younger, they definitely encourage you to get into music, get into art, but then it's more like a hobby or more something that's going to help you get to your school perhaps, or your university. But really to actually take that on board and you know, really make it part of your career, or this passion continue the way you have been doing. And I appreciate it might not be your career, but it's still such a significant part of your life. So what kind of message do you have for these children who are contemplating things like art?
Oh my God, what a tough question, because like that could be just an ongoing topic in itself. talking about funding and representation. And I think, if we all stop, then there's going to be nobody left in those fields. And just think about a world without art. You won't, it will be nothing. There will be no buildings, there will be nothing to look at on the walls, there will be nothing to create. To me, I would say my life would be empty without it. But I think, I was speaking to some of the young girls who I'm connected with anyway. They're choosing their GCSEs at the moment, and one of them wants to do architecture. And even though I've had so many opportunities and been encouraged so much, when I was younger, I was only told to do one art subject by my school. Now she's in a position where she's encouraged to do 2 art subjects, DT, the design and technology, and fine art. Slightly varied. There will be crossover between the 2 naturally, but it's slightly varied. And already I see that progression of, wow, you're able to do 2 very creative subjects. It's not like, oh, you wasted 1 slot in your GCSE options. So I think encouraging people to take on that further education, I think, is really, really important. But even if you divert a little bit, one thing that I've always said in what I'm doing right now is I can probably have a group conversation with many marketing people, and a lot of them have said that they've studied something but they don't use it at all in their career. I'm lucky enough to actually have studied architecture and use that in my career, the technical skills as well as the creative skills. And I think it's more about recognizing where those dots are and making those connections, and bringing all your experiences at home, at school, in other community work, your local Monday, your temple work and things like that, bringing that and to build you as a person and take charge of your journey. Notice not anyone else's journey. So yeah.
Beautiful. And maybe have that confidence in both of the different arts, like appreciate the Western art as well as, like you did, obviously, you went ahead and researched into Eastern art or Indian art. And let's embrace both of these arts, bring it together and be proud of our identity of both the cultures and what they represent and what they mean to us, because ultimately we are a product of both. Yeah. We are not a product of one. So,
agree with that.
So art could be such a beautiful platform to demonstrate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's when I'm researching so in the 70s, there was this whole feminist art movement from America. And, there are things that I definitely connect with there. When you think about what was movements in Britain, well, it was to get women's voting rights, it's to get equal pay. I'm for that, for sure, definitely. I mean, it's quite difficult to say that you're not for that in today's world, but what I feel is that I'm definitely for that, but then I'm also absolutely for Goddess Durga being able to represent and inspire both men and women in so many different ways. And this idea of motherhood, what does that mean? It's so complex and so big. There is a part of me that will be driven more towards dharmic understandings and all of that, and bring that back into who I am and my art and things like that. So I completely agree that we are a product of both. So
yeah, and never know, at some point, hopefully, even the universities might be teaching a bit more than just Greek, the start of art being from the Greek period. So I think it's exciting and we can only hope that these changes come as we get more involved in these types of subjects. I think there'll naturally be that demand to find out more about Indian art, I guess, as years go by. So, it's been a wonderful conversation. Now, I do recognize art and, especially femininity and art is such a huge subject. There's no way we're going to be able to cover this in the 45 minutes that we were allocated. So it was a tip of the iceberg, but we'd love to continue this conversation, Pruthvi, and see how things pan out for you as well, and your Art by Pruthvi page. So I would just like to thank all our audience for joining in and listening to this conversation. Thank you very much to Pruthvi Trivedi, and I hope you've been inspired by what Pruthvi said, and also bringing that pride of both our cultures in your art. Any final words from you, Pruthvi?
No, just thank you very much, Falguni. Thank you.
No, thank you. Namaste.